Buenos nachos, amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, the greatest music podcast in this room. I'm Petey Rave, your man with no plan. Here with me, as always, is my team, my squad, my quorum. We've got Brett.
Certified dank.
Yes, we've got Patrick.
Hello.
And we've got Drew.
I was going to make a joke about Coverville, but now I can't stop laughing at Certified Dank.
Stop it.
Yes. But yes.
We're not just dank, we're Jeff Skunk Baxter dank.
That's right.
Yes. The dankness. The dankest.
There's dank, there's what Snoop and Wiz was smoking at E3, and then there is this podcast.
Yeah.
Right. We got the seal of approval.
Yeah, we got a kiss from a rose. Seal of approval. Okay. But let's move on. We're talking about music. We're making jokes about music. And the provider of music this time, the one that's sharing with us, the rest of the group, is Brett. Brett, what are you sharing with us? What are you sharing with the group?
I went back to an album that was very, very important to me when I decided that I wanted to shift from playing regular rock music to go into jazz, but all my tools were rock and roll music. So I brought Can't Buy a Thrill by the band Steely Dan from 1972. And you would never notice that it was from the 70s.
No. Drew, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I was expecting a goddamn Steely Dan record. I was expecting some pretty stellar musicianship, some jazz influence, some rock and roll, maybe a smidge of horn.
A smidge.
A smidge.
One gross of horn.
Yes.
A
generous dabbling.
A dash. They were going to kick it up a notch with some horn. Maybe of a sax or flugel variety.
Take it down to Flugel Town.
Right.
The A block's sort of weird when we talk about a band that I'm pretty sure we're all familiar with.
Yeah. Patrick, what were your expectations coming into this?
So, confession time. Outside of the singles, I've never listened to a Steely Dan record, and that is one of my great musical shames. Again, I've heard many a Steely Dan song because they did have many singles, and I used to listen to a fair amount of classic rock radio. Because when you live in a small town, that is literally the only thing that's listenable. It's either that or country music, and I'm not real into country.
Rock radio.
Not in my shitty town. Your town is much bigger than my town. It was,
Not in my town
classic
either.
rock. It was classic rock, modern pop, or country music. That was all that I had growing up. So, the singles on here were familiar, but sadly, I've never listened to a Steely Dan record. And while I'm embarrassed to say that, I'm also happy to say now I have, and I have an opinion on it.
Yes. You add your description of your radio, add a vaguely new rock station and a whole lot of Latin music stations, and you have Miami.
I would trade 6 of the 12 country music stations for one Latin music station. I don't even care which variety. It would have been an improvement.
Lumbaton, reggaeton, getting your radio station that plays Prince Royce. 50,
Do you have a radio station? Do you have a radio station that plays nothing but Puerto Rican fusion? Because I want one of those.
You have a radio station with a DJ that says Dale a lot?
I will trade any John Mellencamp playing local Indiana radio station for any of that.
It's almost like terrestrial radio is dead and we should just, stream stuff.
At least we have Shake 108, the one that's owned by a dude.
Oh, dude.
It's still awesome.
Yes.
I will get behind any radio station that's owned by either a college or, a dude.
Yes.
Right.
Pretty all right.
On the wheels of steel coming from
another shout out 2 weeks in a row. Shout out to Shake 108.
That's right.
Yes. Moving on from our expectations, to our to the musical. How do you describe this musically, Brett? How would you describe this musically? What would be the theme's elements? Just in case you want to inform those that haven't listened to a record of Steely Dan.
Going back in time to where this album stuck in my head. I heard the singles forever, and this album sort of floats around, but it's not something that I ever picked up until sometime. It hasn't been that long ago that I really sat down and dug into it, but it's something that I always remembered being a complete album. This album kind of goes places and does all of what it does in that super high, fine, polished way that makes it uncommon, even with the contemporaries. The music is really dense, and it's dense because they're not just your regular band setup. They bring in a lot of hand percussion. They fill things up with different kinds of instruments and instruments used in different ways. There's always a really solid foundation with the drums, the percussion, and the bass, and that lets them do other things that they play around with roles that instruments have. They use a lot of keys in their work: organs, electric pianos of the regular kind with hammers hitting strings. They have probably one of the most iconic electric piano tones and uses. They're probably the only place where you're going to see the hot mashup of piano and steel guitar, and done in ways that you don't expect piano and steel guitar to be playing together. It's something that's got a lot of places you can go, and direct your attention. I thought it would be a fun album to bring here because there's plenty of stuff that we can all sink our teeth into.
Mm-hmm. There is a whole lasagna's worth of substance here. Whole Giordano's deep dish pizza's worth of stuff to dig on into. Drew, what would be the themes elements that caught your attention?
Well, one thing, as far as themes and elements about Steely Dan as a whole that I think is kind of awesome is that Steely Dan is one of those bands that I think people forget how prolific that band was. I guarantee there are people who know tons of Steely Dan songs. There might be a person right now listening to this podcast that knows Steely Dan songs and have no idea of Steely Dan as a band. There are songs that are connected to this band that songs they have written that people just are oh yeah, no, I love that song, and they're it's that sort of band. They make so many we said when we were dropping in. I was hey, let's talk about the fucking hits, because Steely Dan just makes great ass music that is played in a great many places. And I think that's pretty awesome when it's this good. And that's the thing about it. It is that good. Let's talk about a little bit about the musical stylings of Steely Dan. They are jazz influenced. They're a bit of soft rock. They've got a lot of cool groove to them. They started in 72. The underpinnings of the disco era and coming out of the free lovin' 60s and stuff like that. There were still Jimi Hendrix records coming out at this point. And it's this band, and they were, you sort of look at the landscape, and they were something that was completely different, right? And that's sort of cool. The choruses, to me, in a Steely Dan song are always going to be really, really catchy. The instrumentation is always going to be really interesting as well. They have electric sitar in this album multiple times. And the sitar as an instrument, it's a cool instrument. And as a guy who likes cool instruments, I dig it. But usually when you get sitar in any music that can be considered jazz influenced at all, someone's head's going up their ass. because they're playing sitar and they're going to be the cool guy playing sitar. It never gets like this to me. It never gets like that, like egotistical, like, oh, I am playing this because I am on another level of musician. No, it's just a cool fucking thing to have electric sitar and piano playing off of each other. Like, that's cool. Like, that sounds neat. There is a lot of really cool vocal harmonies in this as well. And it's just, like Brett said, it's a really well pieced together record. It's a record that from beginning to end, nothing feels out of place. The production on this record is insane. Just really, really, really well done. I want to go back at some point. I've always wanted to find a really good setup to listen to the 4-channel mix.
Quadraphonic.
Yep. I want to do
Here's the thing. Do you have a 4-channel setup? Because that's the thing.
I have a 5-channel.
No. But like 5-channel and 4-channel are not the same things. Like, you need something that actually knows what to do with a quadraphonic signal.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't say I was going to be able to do it easily. I said I wanted to.
Like, are you going to go to every like vintage store and secondhand store and buy a quadraphonic receiver and 4 matching speakers and set up a room?
I have 4 matching.
Do it right.
Fucking judgment, asshole.
Those right there.
I make really bad decisions sometimes. You don't know. Like,
I'm just saying, quadraphonic isn't all it's cracked up to be. It was an idea. It,
cool.
It didn't last.
Like, it's like I also like hunting down like binaural recordings and shit like that because it's fucking cool.
Get it on wax cylinder.
But you do that is kind of neat to me. Also something that I like about Steely Dan is the lyrics sort of do that thing of they are a word story within the song, and I think that's kind of neat. All in all, this is a well pieced together record. It's got a bit of pop, a bit of jazz, and a lot of rock in it, and it's fun. This is Brett tossed a softball this week. It's just a really well done record by a band that broke up in 81, got back together in 93, and just kept going. And people still go to their concerts because they are still playing good music. It's cool ass.
I'll go ahead and pop this record on my surround sound receiver and just listen on these little guys. Yeah, Patrick, what would be the themes on this that caught your attention?
So, if you talk about like this era of music, you've got sort of on one side of the let's mix jazz and rock together, like full-on jazz fusion, Mahavishnu Orchestra, crazy things. But on the other side, you've got this band with, I think what you could say is equal level of musical ability, but like 10,000 times the pop sense and no like pretension to prevent them from writing clever pop songs. I was so happy listening to this album, and I am so mad at myself for waiting this long to dig into Steely Dan. I don't want to call it classic rock because it isn't. It doesn't sound like late 60s, early 70s rock. It's a lot tighter than that and a lot more, I think, pop focused. But like Brett said, it's super dense, and you could probably listen to any given song on this record 1,000,000 times just trying to figure out what an individual instrument's doing, because it's almost all of them are doing something really cool. This is really, really was surprising to me just how much I enjoyed it. Like, I knew I would like Reelin' in the Years and do it again, but the rest of the record kind of filled out and turned out to be really enjoyable.
Yeah, this is a really nice complete record. It caught me off guard. I was like sitting here now since I thought about my surround sound speakers, and I was sitting here thinking of like, I gotta fix the space. I gotta fix the directions of these things. They're not quite lined up right. Oh wait, we're doing a podcast. So I'm like, I need
audio set up later, Petey.
It's like I've got to move this, and I think maybe remount that one, and like it's like okay, I'm doing a podcast. Wait, Steely Dan. Yeah, this is a cool record overall, and it has so many good sounds, so much good variety, and such good density. But yeah, let's talk about some of the tracks. Brett, what would be some of the key tracks to zero in on?
Well, most of them, but that I try and hone things down a little bit. But seeing that we're playing discussion segment the show, we better trim it down a little bit. Fire in the Hole is that steel guitar and piano mix that I really enjoyed. Not only that, the piano was played well. The solo, while not the most technical example of piano solo, fit really great. Reminded me of stuff that came afterwards where people pounded on pianos in rock and roll music. And another good song is Only a Fool Would Say That. Anytime you throw octave slides and Latin percussion into a song, you're doing what I played every day of my life for about 5 years. That was the kind of music I played, kids. Like fake jazz, but not quite fake. This almost has that feeling of like like somebody pepped up an old jazz standard, but it's not. And it has a couple turns. It's one of those songs that you expect that the guys who are sitting around writing it and playing it together had a lot of fun playing it together, because it's not overly complicated and it has a lot of rests in the singing where conveniently you can throw in a lick from every instrument that's playing. It's pretty awesome. That's a song that I'm sure they enjoyed playing. Dirty Work, a song that is probably the most iconic uses of electric piano in my mind. It's got that tone along with the organ. It's like one of those, like when you're testing out a new set of monitors or headphones, you want to have like a song that's super dynamic, but it's also crystal clean in tone, like no overdrive or distortion on the guitars. Not a whole lot of cymbals being overly abused, but have them hang out there. And this is one of my go-to tracks. The song has like some crazy warmth through the low mids in the mix, and it's one of those songs that makes you want to be a weirdo and go dump tons of money into a like tube hi-fi system and listen to it on like a record in like the most warm and compressed and analog of forms. It's one of those songs that you expect, like in my ear, I hear pops and crackles when there aren't. It drips 1970s music. It's like so 70s that you can, like, if you listen really, really hard, you can hear the shag carpet and the polyester pants. Like, it's just there baked in. And Reelin' in the Years, probably the song of the album for me. The intro to the song is amazing in so many levels. On face value, it's crazy. Like it's a crazy, almost full on square wave fuzzed out guitar. But like there's so much underneath it, and you can go out and find better people to tell you the story. But like it was played by a guy who was a hired studio musician. Like their most famous recording probably was done by a hired gun, which is awesome. And they did it using a cranked Ampeg SVT bass amp of all things to get the tone. Like like I remember reading somewhere that he said it wasn't even like his fourth or fifth choice for doing it, but it's what they had, so they did it. And it's probably one of the most iconic tones of music anywhere. Like just thinking of it, that I can hear that fuzz, and the solo too. Was with the delay was pretty awesome. But that's a great story. Go out and read somebody else telling you better. But it's a pretty hip song. It's a real humdinger. Better than Broccoli.
It's a hip happening tune.
That's yes. Right. It's a real toe tapper.
Yeah, it's a nice feel good feel. I don't know. I couldn't come up with a new thing to say, and I don't know why I keep talking.
Feel good feels. That says it all.
Yeah. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So do it again, as we are doing it again. The string, the solo, all of it, the whole song, like it comes at you from like almost 5 different directions at times, but it never gets lost in its own mix. There's still that underlying groove to it that just works. I want to talk about the David Palmer fronted track of Dirty Work. Not because Palmer does a great job on vocals. It's fantastic. He gets a few singing credits in this one, but the sax from another hired gun, as Brett would put it, Jerome Richardson. The sax on this was so good. And the thing about it is that sax is such a vocal instrument that to have it throughout the entire song and meshing so well with the vocals, but never taking away from Palmer's singing was fantastic to me. Really well done there from Mr. Richardson. And then you kind of can't not talk about Reelin' in the Years. Like, let me just talk about the other single because, well, God damn it, it's Reeling in the Years. It's a song that's sort of iconic. It's got that little bit of grit to the guitar. It's a bouncy piano feel. The layered chorus vocal is great. And then the solo comes in. It is one of the coolest guitar solos of all time. It isn't super fast. It isn't super crazy. It's just a cool-ass guitar solo. It's got some cool technical work behind it. It's played really cleanly and really well. If Jimmy Page can say it's his favorite guitar solo of all time, I think it's worth the price of admission. I'm going to put that one out there.
Yeah. If you're going to listen to anybody's opinion, Jimmy Page.
Page, pretty good opinion to listen to on guitar solos, oddly enough.
Yeah. Patrick, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
So I'll start. I'm going to end up hitting a lot of the same things. Do it again. And this is sort of, I'm going to talk about it sort of in the context of where you hear it. You hear that on classic rock radio, which is dominated by blues-centric rock bands, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, stuff like that. Stuff that is rooted in blues. And this is totally not a blues song. Like, you get basically you get the occasional fun stuff on classic rock radio, like Santana, or if you're lucky, Steely Dan. Like, stuff that doesn't just fit into that normal mold. There's some really cool hand percussion. It walks like the thin line between pop focused rock music and like this little edge of jazz fusion crazy instrumentalism. And it's got that fucking cool sitar guitar, which is just fun. Dirty Work. Everyone you guys talked about. I'm gonna talk about the chorus. We talk about how the chorus of Dirty Work is like Hall & Oates quality harmonies. Like, I got like that sort of really spectacular sing-along chorus vibe that you get with something like a Hall & Oates song. And I say that with a ton of as a really strong compliment. That is, it's a really cool song. It's got some good organ sounds. This album is all about its electric organs and its Hammond organs and electric pianos and all the fun keyed instruments that we really don't see a whole lot of anymore. Reelin' in the Years, one of the great guitar melodies ever. Like Brett said, the sickest fuzzed out tone that they, like most great fuzzed out tones came from something other than a fuzz pedal. The Beatles did it once with plugging directly into a Neve board and cranking it. This was apparently a bass amp cranked up. And it's such a perfect song. I feel like you could write a PhD in music about Reelin' in the Years. That song, there's so much good shit going on in there that it is, if you are not a music person, it's just a rock and roll song from the 70s. But if you care about music and specifically if you maybe play an instrument or really care about instrumentation, there's so much cool shit going on in every second of this song that you can. I listened to this 3 times in a row earlier. I never listened to the same song on repeat, but I like I listened to it and I'm like, I got to start that again and like pay attention to this. And I did that a couple times earlier today. It is such a great song. And I knew I loved it, but I didn't know I loved it this much. And honorable mention to Fire in the Hole, just because I like piano rock, and this had like that great intermingling of the pianos and vocals, and turned out to be a really nice song.
Yeah. And a pedal steel solo, which is, shout out to our own pedal steel playing friend Squiggles. I imagine it's one thing he'll appreciate on there amongst many things.
Can we talk about? I think Squiggles will. Yeah, I was going to say, I think Squigs will like this record if he's not already intimately familiar with it.
He's already contacted me. I would assume that in slow pitches, this is rolling the ball to him.
Yeah, this is putting it on a tee.
Yeah.
So good stuff, great songs. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. Drew, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
Like I said at the beginning, and in the A block, it's sort of hard to give an impression of this when it's Steely fucking Dan. Steely Dan is a band that I think deserves every ounce of money they get, every ounce of fame that they get, they do stuff. Steely Dan as a group, because there are rotating studio musicians, as we've said before, that go in and out of that band, but they have never put out a product that was not consistently good, I don't think, throughout the years. And if they have, I haven't heard it. Can't Buy a Thrill has some songs you 100% know. I am confident in saying that. Like, doesn't matter if you've heard of this band before or not. You've heard some of these songs if you've lived on this earth. And I think the world is better with bands like Steely Dan in it, because it is hard to describe, and yet when you hear it, it makes so much sense that you're like, how is everyone not doing this? And then you realize, like, oh wait, it takes a lot of musicianship and a lot of time and a lot of effort to make music like this.
A lot of care.
Great care. And it was their first studio album. Like, it's not fair. It's not fair. Like, most people's first studio albums are shit shows and produced piss poorly, and this studio album, their first studio album is this damn good. It's just not. It's not even fair.
Patrick.
Fuck you, Beckman Fagan.
Patrick, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album?
So when people talk about like this era of music, specifically the late 60s and early 70s, and how it was, the best or whatever, it was because record labels were run by music nerds. This would never get popular release today. It just wouldn't. Like, music that comes through that system isn't allowed to be this. And that's the nature of it. Now, not that bands aren't doing shit this crazy now, but this was relatively popular music, at its time. I mean, many of these were longtime hit songs, and you still hear them today. This is like when you hear the word of a music genre called fusions. I'm talking about jazz fusion, which is kind of a contemporary. It was sort of jazz and rock, but like this, you get so many little elements and ideas from other musical genres that get tucked in here. Like Brett said, like slide, pedal steel used in a way you don't hear, because this isn't really blues based music. You get a lot of hand percussion, again, not used in like Latin music where it's most common.
This jam is bands. Jam bands.
Jam bands, I guess. Yeah. But like, what other than the Grateful Dead, what jam bands were really doing their thing at this time? Or am I just not
that time.
Jam
like
bands?
Last weekend down the street.
I mean, last weekend,
like
yes,
30
I get
white
it. Everyone
doing hand percussion.
Yeah, every 33-year-old saw Fish when they were a kid and had to do it. But like this, there's so many like this is music made by two guys who fucking love music, and not just one kind of music. They love all of it and wanted to bring it all together. I say this sometimes, and very few bands that we've done on this, I'm like, okay, I have to go listen to everything these guys have ever recorded. And this is one where I'm definitely going to, at bare minimum, listen to all the old Steely Dan records after this, because this was really enjoyable. It tickles some of my my love of why I like this era of like progressive rock, because the instrumentation's so high quality. Why I occasionally dip my toes into jazz fusion. This is so good, and I feel horrible about myself for not listening to it until now.
Mm-hmm. You can dip your fingers and your toes into it. It's a great overall record, and it's a great. Everything you guys said was better articulated than I could say, but it's such a cool, good record. It's such a cool, good feel to it, and just a great overall, just good vibe. As I can speak in as vague overtones as possible. It's just such a good classic record for a reason. Brett, what would be your conclusive thoughts on this album as a whole?
Well, I mean, conclusive thoughts on this album. This album shows its age. It is definitely an album of its time period, but it's still fun now as ever. This album is, I don't know, I would call this a hobby grade album, certified Brett Hibbard's hobby grade seal of approval. More on my conclusive thoughts on Steely Dan. I think the best use of Steely Dan in a non-musical form in 2008, when John McCain went on to Saturday Night Live, played a high school art teacher who made a set of 4 Steely Dano lanterns. And forever I've been looking for an image of a Steely Dano lantern. But he made sure to point out his Skunk Baxter. These guys, they played music with other people. They're all like, there are people in this band that are rocket scientists. Like it's right up the Squiggles alley. But you know, it's a kind of music that doesn't get a whole lot of love because it's for people that are mired in the music world, and it's not something that is from the outset really appealing to everyone. But if it's sort of appealing to you, dig deeper. You'll find more different stuff. More different, but it's good different. Steely Dan Lantern. Send them in the email at the
recordbreakerspodcast@gmail.com.
Correct. I think I would start going into the spiel after that. Like, like doing my PD runs the show impression all the time in my head. I can do it. But.
Yes.
This was this. Well, that was that.
But now we get to we gave our thoughts. Now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to our haiku reviews. We get to kind of summing it all up in poetic form. Yeah. I'll start with you again, Drew. Drew, what is your haiku?
Softball thrown from Brett. I don't need to hit it out. They already did.
Patrick, what is your haiku?
This is excellent. Why did it take me so long? My shame is over.
No, it's not. Sorry.
Well, at least pertaining to this. My haiku.
I meant this shame. I have a lot of shame. We're gonna
redo some of the old episodes now that we've hit all our stride. Come back next week when we review Glassjaw.
For the third time.
The third time.
They have another record, and there keeps being rumors of a new one.
Yeah.
They've been recording a new record for like 11 years now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Chinese democracy.
Yeah.
Worth the wait.
Yep.
Yeah, that album was super good.
God.
So, true story, I listened to that album once, and it is top 5 worst things I've ever heard. Right up there with the Korn and Skrillex record.
No.
When Korn did dubstep.
Nope.
I wouldn't say that. I would say...
Chinese democracy is fucking awful.
Correct.
It's not bad.
You're right.
It's
Worst
up
thing
there with
ever.
Korn doing dubstep.
I wouldn't put. I would say I would, and before
I
getting
mean,
into
I don't
it, I would
like
say
I don't like
aggressively
normal
okay.
Guns N' Roses, so
Okay, fair enough.
It's
Fair
extremely
enough.
moderate.
it's up there with Saint Anger, like just awful records.
I will
Again,
put
I
it
would
with something.
categorize it as aggressively okay.
Yeah.
I could actually have many thoughts.
Next week on Record Breakers,
Oh
apparently,
God, no.
Chinese democracy.
apparently Chinese democracy. God
Trying to
damn
get
it.
all those hot
God.
clicks.
Fuck. I might even be able to just do that as I could even do a post show the show on that. You never know. But yeah, okay. So this to the other thing. My haiku. Classic soft rock sound. Perfect tunes for a road trip. This is old school cool. Yeah, I don't know. Not a great haiku, but yeah, it was a good idea. Brett, what is your haiku?
No, for real, guys. It's actually a classic. It earned the title, which we learned earlier is hobby grade certified dank.
Yeah. Hobby grade. That would be the title of this episode if we titled episodes.
He's talking about weed.
So there is
marijuana.
no weed and Steely Dan that ever go together. Don't listen to anyone. Those two things completely different. There was no marijuana being used by anyone in a 5-mile radius of this album being recorded.
No, there was literally a band member named Skunk.
Yes. Also, they were named after a dildo. Which is fun. But yeah, that's Steely Dan. You can of course find this on our Spotify playlist. You should have already listened to it. You can go on that Spotify playlist. Keep up with us. Play along at home. Do your homework using that. On that Spotify playlist will be next week's record, and that is provided by Drew. Drew, what do you got for us?
Well, we're going to PA. Sorry, we're taking you back to PA, Pat. For an album that actually was released not last Friday, as of the time of this recording, but the Friday before that, February the 3rd. This is possibly our newest record ever. I'm going to have to call a check on that for the guys, but this is a band called the Menzingers from Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is their new album, After the Party, is what I'm going to be bringing.
We'll have to consult Record Breaker Stats. The website recordbreakerstats.com.
Music prospectus. Yeah.
To see what time of release to time of podcast episode release, and sort that out. But until then, you can of course find us all over the internet. Patrick is at Swagger. Brett is at HeyBittyBibbard, HIBBITYBIBBARD. Drew is at XJuciferX. I'm at PD Rave. The show is at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com if you want to email us. Specifically pictures of Steely Dan the Lanterns and other things that you might like, but
mostly Steely Dan Lanterns.
Exactly. Find us all over the place.
Somebody makes a Steely Dan lantern, I'm giving you $1.
An out-of-season Steely Dan lantern would make my day.
Yes.
Actually, it doesn't. I will pay for the pumpkin, and I will give you $1.
Yes.
Give me the receipt of your pumpkin, and I will add $1 to it, and that will end up in your PayPal.
Exactly. Do that. But also check us on iTunes, Stitcher, everywhere podcasts are found. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Dare you find a pumpkin this time of year? Toodaloo.
Store?
The pumpkins grow. They are a seasonal fruit. They're actually a berry. A really, really shitty berry.
You're out of your gourd.